Most people haven't matured past the age of 15 and are still desperate to be invited to sit at the cool kids table at the high school cafeteria.
You look at the metrics for prestige in the liberal order. You think about everything from Emmys to Harvard and Yale degrees to being in the New York Times. A writer for a small conservative outlet desperately craves the day when he's invited to write at the New York Times. You know who isn't really itching to write at, say, National Review? Someone who's a columnist at the New York Times.
Praise be Jesus Christ. This is Father Robert McTague of the Society of Jesus, your daily host for the Catholic Current, where we bring Christ to the world and the world to Christ. You're listening to us from the station of the Cross Studios, your local radio station, and the iCatholic Radio mobile app, where we proclaim the fullness of truth with clarity and charity. As always, let's start with prayer. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Almighty God, through the intercession of St. Ignatius Loyola, we ask that you pour forth your Holy Spirit upon us, a spirit of discernment, that we hear your voice and obey your command. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Well, friends, we need to talk about a topic I've been talking about a lot lately. I speak about it sometimes behind the scenes with the Catholic Medical Association. I spoke on it recently with Sarah Corrier on her channel, The Crusader Gal. I spoke about it on Newsmax recently, which attracted some disapproving attention from Amazon. But that's another story for another time. We need to continue this conversation because it's moving quickly, and it is spreading. My guest for the first half of today's show to talk about that is President of the American Principles Project, Terry Schilling. Welcome to the Catholic Current.
Thank you so much for having me, Father. I love being here.
Terry, it's confusing for a lot of people. I know there are some regulations that changed recently from the Department of Health and Human Services. There's the Equality Act making its way through Congress. Can you put out a map for us of what the issues are and what the trends are?
Yeah, over the last century, the 20th century in America was really, I would call it the century of the sexual revolution. It's when the birth control was introduced. It was when abortion was mainstreamed. It was when no-fault divorce, a whole host of things. And we started going down this path of separating the procreative act of sex from procreation. And when you do that, you have a lot of dysfunction and disorders that follow. Mm-hmm. What we're dealing with now is a very powerful and influential political movement from the left that is just part of the sexual revolution. This transgender movement is based in an ideology that is not seeking to liberate people from their sexuality. It's seeking to liberate people from their own bodies, from their biological sex. And what we are seeing happen with our laws in Congress and through executive orders in the Biden administration is they are moving to eliminate the competition. The progressive left wants to take away the ability of parents, doctors, of teachers, of children even, to disagree with this agenda that they have of sexual liberation and I guess you would call this gender liberation. And they want to pass laws like the Equality Act, which would ban discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation, gender identity, would put those two things into the civil rights law. And it's geared at forcing society, it's geared at forcing Americans to accept this very radical, very disordered agenda from the sexual left. Regarding the new regulations that came out from Health and Human Services and Xavier Becerra, this is essentially non-discrimination in terms of health and human services and healthcare related fields. And what that means is that if there's a person who identifies as transgender, let's say it's a 15-year-old girl who identifies as male, she is seeking a mastectomy to look more like a male instead of a woman. If she goes to a Catholic doctor, for instance, who does not believe in mastectomies for healthy young girls, he is now at risk of a civil rights lawsuit and of being fired, of being punished, of being fined. They want to eliminate, this is a very coercive movement. They want to coerce doctors and experts in their field to go against their own judgment on what the best care is for their patients. And it's very nefarious. And on top of that, they want to force taxpayers and health insurance, people that have health insurance plans, to pay for all this.
Right.
So it's very problematic. There's lots of issues with it, and it's all related to America's problem with its sexual brokenness.
Friends, I'm speaking with Terry Schilling, president of the American Principle Project. Terry, I agree fully with your analysis that we want, the illusion since the Garden of Eden is that you can have sexuality without consequence, and that souls don't matter and bodies don't matter, and God's wisdom certainly doesn't matter. God's wisdom inscribed in natural law and even in our flesh as human beings as male and female, and we want to be liberated that for the rallying cry of my will be done. And that's destructive on a social level, it's destructive on a spiritual level, but when you have the power of the bureaucratic state reinforced by the propaganda arm of mainstream media and social media, I see a lot of ugly on the horizon. So, we think of that poor gentleman, the Christian baker in Colorado, who it seems every year is dragged into court for another thought crime. Is something like that going to be happening, say, for Catholic doctors, Catholic hospitals, even Catholic schools? Is that on the horizon, on your view?
That is only on the horizon if we fail at fighting the left on this. That's only on the horizon if we fail to stop the Equality Act, if we fail to elect a new president, if we fail to stand up and protect not just ourselves and our friends and our pastors and our family members, we'll fail to protect our own children. And that is a future that we really don't want to head down.
Right.
I believe that this movement, it's very important because there's so much propaganda throughout the entire political movement with this sexual left. It's just so full of lies, misconceptions, purposeful misconceptions, propaganda, and deceit. It's important to clarify this and what they're actually pushing at every step of the way. So when Democrats say they support the so-called Equality Act, what they really are supporting is taking away parental rights and access to their children if the children have confusion about their gender and the parents don't want to pursue cross-sex hormones or puberty blockers or what they call gender affirmation care. This would take away the rights of doctors, of course. They would be forced to perform mastectomies or leave the field of medicine if they disagree with that. You think about what a doctor's primary role is and what your job is as a healthcare worker. Your job is to make sure that someone's body is working properly to its full functioning. And what the transgender movement wants to do is to force doctors to get people to alter their bodies so that they do not function healthily and properly. It's very nefarious. This won't stop at the bakers. This won't stop with the doctors. It won't stop with the parents. It's going to get to the point where eventually, if we don't stop it, where it will be illegal to even assign, quote unquote, gender to your children and raise them as in any gender without them claiming to be, coming out and identifying as a certain gender. It's so nefarious. It strikes humanity at the deepest root. When you think about who you are as a human being, male and female is one of the most basic identities that we have. And what the Democrats and what the progressive left seeks to do, and I would actually argue that what the devil seeks to do is they want more confusion, they want more destruction, they want these changes that they make. The mastectomies, the hysterectomies of healthy utero, they're permanent. They're permanent changes. And we're told by the mainstream media, we're told by the transgender left that this is all reversible. This is all, it's about consent. It's about saving lives. No, this is destruction of lives. And it's evil. And we have to root it out everywhere it is.
And the momentum is so great that when you think, well, that couldn't happen, that couldn't be real. A story just crossed my desk. I'm trying to think of a delicate way to say this on the air in a family-friendly context, but there is an organization that can get crocheted genitals that you can strap on to your infant child if you suspect your child is already transgender. So, in effect, you've got children who are being groomed. Even if it were a joke, it would be a very bad joke. But this wasn't the Babylon Bee. I mean, this is a real thing that's taking place. And when we divorce ourselves from our bodies and from our minds, of course, we're going to distance ourselves from God. And what concerns me very greatly is that the power of the state and the power of social pressure is going to make a lot of people either cooperate with fear or just become blind to what the dangers really are. And along the way, young people are going to be broken, and young people are going to be destroyed, and lives and souls will be lost. And that's one of the reasons why I want to continue the conversation with you in the next segment. Friends, when we come back, I continue my conversation with Terry Schilling, president of the American Principle Project. We're going to be talking about regulations regarding transgenderism, how it's going to affect institutions, and what ordinary people can do. We want you to be informed. We don't want you to be discouraged. Remember, our rallying cry here at the Catholic Current is Christus Mundo, Mundus Christo, bringing Christ to the world and the world to Christ. We do it because our Lord says so, for the greater glory of God, the love of our neighbor, and the salvation of our own soul. After the broadcast today, go to thestationofthecross.com, get our resources list, download our audio as podcast. Everything you need to keep the conversation going among your family and friends, we give to you. Together, let's take it around the world. We'll be back in just 2 minutes. Stay with us.
Hi, this is Joe McLean, host of the Catholic Drive Time Morning Show, joining you on the Station of the Cross Catholic Radio Network each weekday morning at 7 a.m. We'll keep you informed and inspired with insightful guests and breaking news stories of the day. That's the Catholic Drive Time, weekday morning, 7 a.m. on the Station of the Cross and the iCatholic Radio app. We'll see you then. Praise be to Jesus.
You're listening to The Catholic Current with Father Robert Matej from the Station of the Cross Catholic Media Network. Stay connected with the show, our guests and topics, by following the show on Twitter and Gab. Just search for The Catholic Current.
Praise be Jesus Christ. This is Father Robert Matej of the Society of Jesus, your daily host for the Catholic Current, where we bring Christ to the world and the world to Christ. You're listening to us on the Station of the Cross Studios, your local radio station, and the iCatholic Radio mobile app, where we proclaim the fullness of truth with clarity and charity. We're talking about the civil and social import of recent changes and health regulations regarding transgenderism and medical delivery. My guest today is Terry Schilling, president of the American Principle Project. Terry, we both know that we could talk for hours and hours about this, and when we have more time, I want to talk about where this all came from. I agree with your analysis that you've said elsewhere that a lot of it is rooted in Marxism, which is just the latest form of totalitarianism. People in power want to separate people from communities, from God, and from themselves so that they're more malleable and more obedient. But let's get practical, Terry. People are informed, they beat their breasts. I'm hoping faithful Catholics will reach for the rosary beads. We certainly need to pray. We need to tell the truth, which is what we try to do every day here at the Catholic Current. On your view, and the work you're doing with the American Principle Project, what can ordinary people do at a practical level?
The most important thing that people need to do at a practical level, I'm actually going to give two things that are really, really important. The first and most basic thing that your listeners need to do is to make sure that their children and their grandchildren or their great-grandchildren are protected, that they are free from all of this propaganda and this inundation of misinformation and subversion of really what the human person is. They need to protect their children from this. And they need to make sure that, if you're a grandparent You need to make sure that your children are protecting their children and that they're paying attention, because this transgender stuff, this LGBT stuff, it's everywhere. It's not just in our laws. It's not just being taught in our schools. It's in your kids' cartoons.
Yes.
It's in your kids' storybooks. It's in their libraries. It's in the online forums and the online video games, the Minecraft, the Roblox, all of these games that allow people to interact with each other and target kids. It's all there. And the most basic duty that we have as Catholics and Christians is to protect the ones that God sent us to protect. And that's our children and grandchildren. And so that's number one. That's the most basic. If you want to move beyond that, you want to work to really save these next generations, then by goodness, get involved and engaged in politics. The people in America, we've embraced this lie that politics is downstream from culture, which I'm not going to argue that politics isn't impacted by the other cultural institutions. But politics is a part of culture. When you change the law, you change society. You change behaviors. You change how people think. When you pass a law, what you are saying to the entire world and to everyone that lives in your nation that has to hold true to those laws is, this is the bare minimum for morality in this country. And we are getting our clocks clean when it comes to protecting ourselves with good laws and keeping the bad guys from passing bad laws. Politics is not downstream from culture. It is culture. And if we don't step up and get into that arena, we will lose this fight, and we will be talking about the great movies and books that we wrote to educate people in the gulags.
Right. And as someone who writes and speaks and teaches, I take that challenge to heart. We do need to know who's on the Board of Education locally, whether we have children or not. We need to know who the district attorney is. We need to vote wisely about county sheriff. We do have to start building small communities, not only small communities of faith, but small communities that vote, that generate candidates, elections, et cetera, et cetera. We can't leave it to somebody else to do something, because too many people have done that for too long. And now here we are. In Spain, there was a politician who was vilified. I forget what his punishment was, but he basically said, men can't give birth because a man doesn't have a uterus. Well, that's hate speech now. On Mother's Day, there were prominent members of a certain American political party who tweeted out celebrating birthing persons. This seems like a very dark dystopian version of Alice in Wonderland. Now, you've been watching this closely, and you look under some very ugly rocks. Do you see signs of hope? What gets you out of bed in the morning?
Absolutely, Father. There's always hope, because look, at the end of the day, we know who wins in the end. And the other thing that we should be confident in is that the truth is on our side. The truth is on our side. The truth is not on their side, which is why they have to spend a lot more money to achieve the change that they want. Think about where we are as a country with our cultural institutions. You look at academia, the medical community, and these medical associations. You look at Hollywood, the mainstream media, social media, big tech, all of that. The left had to take over all of those institutions before they could really get the changes that they were hoping to get on this transgender stuff. I believe that that's due largely in part to the fact that America had such, not just a strong base in Christianity, but a strong base with families. God is wonderful because he created this world, and he gave us these natural institutions like the family that, even if you lose your faith, even if you stop going to church, you still have that family there that's going to make you think long term and be dedicated to something besides yourself. And I think that the reason America is really in the place that it's at right now is because we've gotten away from the very basics of getting married, having babies. These are things that's what life is about. Joe Biden unveiled this American Families Plan And essentially what it is it's just universal daycare with, 2 years of free community college. And what struck me about his plan is that the Democrats and the progressive left, they completely misunderstand the purpose of work. They view work as an end in and of itself. We have to get more people into the workforce. We have to get more people out of the home, paying taxes and making money for people. We need to get the GDP up. No, we work. We start careers. We do all this for our families, for our communities. I don't work my tail off at work every day, every week, just to make a name for myself in the press. If you pay attention to the headlines about me, they're not going to be good in the mainstream media anyway. But
right.
We work for our families, and that is what we need to start getting back to. It's stop sending our kids to college. They don't need it. They're not actually learning anything. They're just racking up a bunch of debt and getting indoctrinated and having their faith and everything about them questioned. Get back to the basics. Get married. Have kids. Trust God. I think that's the toughest thing for a lot of people, especially when it comes to schools and finances and having kids, is we don't trust God enough. Now, I'm the eldest. I'm lucky enough, Father, to be the eldest of 10 kids, and I'm also blessed to have 5 children of my own. And my parents instilled a very simple value in me, and that is that when it comes to children and family, you just have to be open to whatever God gives you. And you have to trust that if he sends these little babies and kids your way, that he's going to be there to provide for you. Going back to that first point that I suggested for your listeners about protecting your children, protecting your grandkids, I just had to pull my kids out of public school. We did a year long of homeschooling, and that's a little bit too much for my wife and I. So we're putting up the money, and we're going to send our kids to Catholic school. And I have no regrets about it. And I know that as difficult as it's going to be and as straining as it is to pay those bills every month, God's going to provide. Because he doesn't want my kids in these government-run schools that are teaching my kids that, America is evil and that pornography is okay and all these weird things about sex. He's going to provide. And we need to get back to just trusting God, standing up, not being afraid of the devil, not being afraid of the left, and doing the right thing regardless of what the world will do to us.
Friends, I'm speaking with Terry Schilling. He's president of the American Principle Project. We began our conversation talking about federal regulations, medicine, and transgenderism, and we're talking about developing healthy responses. Terry, my dear Jesuit friend, Father Joseph Fessio, said that nearly every social ill can be solved by faithful Catholics having more children, and there's a great deal of wisdom in that. Really, everything starts with the quality of family. And the best predictor for your child not to be subject to bizarre propaganda or ideology is to have a strong family life that is rooted in faith. And having a strong family life where people are accountable to each other. And I find it really alarming that there's so much effort in separating children from their families, and that's never a good thing to say that mom and dad don't have anything to say about the raising of their minor children. There are some states that want to have the regulation that if Sally wants to become Sammy and she's 12 years old and wants to take puberty blockers, mom and dad don't have to know. When you have an authority figure say, hey, Sally, hey, Johnny, we have a secret. Let's not tell mommy and daddy, that the door is wide open to abuse. Tell us about the American Principle Project. What's the role in the cultural fight of your organization?
Father, what we do is at American Principles Project is very, very simple. And we're actually getting ready to launch something that I think your listeners will be very, very interested in. It's a bit of a surprise, but our mission is to organize families in politics to protect and save the family and America. That's all we do. We want to educate parents about the threats that their children are facing in school, the threats that their families are facing, and how to fight back. And the week of Father's Day, we have a very big announcement coming up. I think all of your listeners would be incredible members of this. We're launching a membership program. We'll be giving out more details, but I would encourage your listeners that if they want to get involved in politics and they want to know the biggest threats to their family, go to AmericanPrinciplesProject.org and click the sign up and join us button. And what we will do is we will keep you updated on this launch next month, the week of Father's Day. But we're organizing families in politics to make it easier to get married, have babies, and protect our kids. It's that simple. The family has never been under more attack, and the time is now to start fighting back and to draw a line in the sand.
Well, I agree with you that whatever ills we're facing, starting a family and starting a business are indispensable building blocks. Friends, when we come back, we're going to continue on our conversation with Terry Schilling. He's the president of the American Principles Project. We're going to be talking about how Governor DeSantis of Florida has been pushing back on issues that have been very much concerning me, and I believe concern you too. It's an important conversation. You don't want to miss it. Follow us on the podcast platform of your choice. We're on nearly all of them. If you can find audio, you can find us. Don't just download the audio and spread it around. Follow the channel, write a review. We need these conversations to go around the world to get the attention they deserve. Let's do it together. We'll be back in just 2 minutes. Please do stay with us.
This is The Catholic Current from the Station of the Cross Catholic Media Network. Catch up on an episode you've missed or share them with your family or friends. The Catholic Current is podcasted wherever you enjoy listening. Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, and the iCatholic Radio mobile app. Praise be Jesus Christ. This is Father Robert McTague of the Society of Jesus, your daily host for the Catholic Current, where we bring Christ to the world and the world to Christ. You're listening to us from the Station of the Cross Studios, your local radio station, and the iCatholic Radio mobile app, where we proclaim the fullness of truth with clarity and charity. I'm in conversation with Terry Schilling. He's president of the American Principles Project. We've been talking about how the transgender issue is a very important issue with many dimensions. It's not just political and legal, it's moral, it's social, it's even spiritual. Terry, what I have in mind, there are a lot of people who are very concerned about the topics that we have been discussing. And I think of what Mark Twain once quipped about the weather. He said, everyone complains about the weather, but no one ever does anything about it. There are lots of people who are very much concerned about the effect of transgender ideology kind of throwing its weight around, so to speak. And people wonder what can be done. You have a governor in mind who's actually doing something. Tell us, please.
Yes, and just to be totally clear, you're right. The whole reason that APP and my organization decided to get involved in this transgender issue in the first place is because no one was doing anything about it. And there were some groups that were fighting back against it, but they weren't doing it in the best political way possible, right? So politics, how we see it, is it's the art of the possible. In America, you have to convince the people about your arguments and your policies and get them on board. And what we've found is this women's sports angle with the transgender issue. Mm-hmm. It really shows the unfairness and the, for lack of a better word, the insanity of these laws, these sexual orientation and gender identity laws, because people know that males are inherently, just biologically, more athletic. They're taller on average. Their bone densities, more. They have more muscle mass, faster. You name it. Men are more athletic, and this really shows how unfair gender identity policy is. But the magic has been, this has been an issue that not only has popular support in opposing, but it also has been championed by politicians. And that was the other hurdle. There are lots of issues of this gender identity stuff that the American people are with the Catholic Church on, that they're with the conservative movement on. But it's tough to get politicians to talk about bathrooms. They just don't want to do it. We've had a lot of success, and Governor DeSantis is the biggest one so far. He just signed, I was at the bill signing actually on Monday, and he signed the women's sports bill into law. And this bill is very simple. It says boys will play boys sports, girls will play girls sports, and if there's any problems with this, we're going to give the female athletes a right of private action so that they can protect their rights. It's very simple. It's very commonsensical. It's very popular. And we have to, as Catholics in America, we have to work within the political system that we have in order to make changes. And there are a number of very important areas that the transgender issue touches that we need to start leading on and we need to start using to fight back. The issue of protecting children in schools from the transgender ideology is so popular, and it's something that politicians can get behind. There's a lot we can do on this. When I talk to people, and I talk to a lot of them as part of my work, they ask me what to do. And I ask them, well, who's your local school board member? And 90% of the time, they can't name that. And that's a major problem.
Yes.
Right? The local governments, the school boards, impact your family and your life infinitely more than Joe Biden does. And in fact, a good school board and a good, strong local government can stand as a bulwark against a really bad presidential regime like the Biden administration. You have to get engaged at the local level at the school board. You have to run for school board if you can't find anyone. But you have to hold these people accountable. That's step number one.
I was thinking, a friend of mine, when his son was born, said, my son was born on a Thursday, and by Friday morning I was really concerned about who was on the school board. And it's really stuck with me over the years. And, I want to be clear, and I'm sure you'd agree with me, Terry, for people who experience gender dysphoria, yes, that can be very painful, and we encourage people to get the help that they need to manage their pain and come to clarity and peace. And that's really, really different from saying we're motivated by hate, because we're not motivated by hate. And people say, hey, keep your Catholic faith to yourself. Well, no, but also it's just common sense. Somebody with an Adam's apple and big hairy hands shouldn't be wrestling teenage girls or showering with them at the gymnasium. It's really very ordinary common sense. A case in point, I think back to an Australian parliamentarian who wanted to speak about abortion, and he was told to shut up because he's not a woman and abortion is only a women's issue. And the next day he said, hey, today I identify as a woman. And for the next 15 minutes, and now I'm going to talk about abortion. There's a level of madness, and there's a level of erasing of the obvious that concerns me very, very greatly. Friends, I'm speaking with Terry Schilling. He's president of the American Principles Project. In this segment, we're talking about Governor DeSantis responding to federal and social initiatives regarding the transgender issue. Do you think that the good example of Governor DeSantis will catch on in other states? I ask that as I look at my web browser and I look at a search page. Both the web browser by one company I won't name and the search page, another company I won't name, have rainbows in today because it's June, and that's what we do in June in the Western Hemisphere, at least. Do you think that there's going to be enough momentum where other governors might follow his example?
Yes, and it's very simple for why I believe that, because Governor DeSantis has already been a leader and has impacted and brought more Republicans and conservatives on board with the other areas where he's made progress for the country. You look at how he handled the shutdown, right? He was a leader there. He didn't go along with all the insanity. He kept the schools open. And you then started to see other governors who saw that the water was warm, that Governor DeSantis was getting praised by the base, that he was getting, rewarded by voters, and they started to follow suit. And in the same way, I was so thrilled with Governor DeSantis when he signed that bill into law on Tuesday, primarily because of the effect that it's going to have on the rest of the country. But here's the big hurdle that's been holding up progress on all of these bills that address the problems caused by the LGBT movement is typically when a Republican state decides to pass legislation to protect women's sports or protect women's private spaces or ban the mutilation of children in the form of attempted sex changes.
Right.
That what happens is woke corporations And the NCAA, Major League Baseball, NFL, you name the big multi-conglomerate, they come in and they threaten boycotts. They threaten to withhold competitions and economic investment. This is what they did to McCrory. This is what they tried to do to Pence. This is what they did in Arizona on the immigration stuff about 8 years ago. And it's worked up until now. And it's because Governor Ron DeSantis had the perfect response. He said, he was asked about it, what are you going to do if they boycott you and take out tournaments from the NCAA? He said, I don't care. We're going to do the right thing for our daughters every day and twice on Sunday. We're willing to lose any competition. We're willing to lose economic investment. These corporations, if they want to boycott our state over this issue, fine. We're not selling out our daughters. And that's the example. That is the type of political leader we need. And I expect that to go throughout the country with a lot of other Republican leaders. It's funny, these leaders, when you're a leader, you impact other leaders. A lot of times people look to see like, oh, this is a good idea. This works. And sometimes it just takes the one brave or one crazy guy willing to do something to stand up to the bullies and set an example. And then you've got a wave going on and a real movement.
Terry, I've been a communicator in one form or another for a very long time, and I know the importance of having a message that is clear, that is direct, memorable, and easily repeatable. So just to say, we're not going to sell out our daughters. I mean, how do you argue against that? Who's going to say, no, really, you should? That's a brilliant stroke. Let's shift the conversation a little bit because Governor DeSantis has been busy, and I'll point out for those who are listening, I'm not a political partisan. I'm not an apologist for any candidate for any political party. I'm a philosopher, I'm a theologian, and I'm a Catholic priest analyzing what I see through those lenses. Let's take a look at something else that concerns me, and I think this is part, and it has it extends roots into it from the transgender issue, and that's the issue of cultural Marxism. That's a phrase that's been around for a while. It has a lot to do with social engineering, and it has a lot to do not only with economics, but also with discussions about race as well as sexuality. And Governor DeSantis has said that there has to be a pushback also against cultural Marxism. What can you tell us about that, please?
Well, he's exactly right. The Republican Party on these cultural issues has acted as controlled opposition, right? For decades. Roe v. Wade happened in 1973, and we are just now, almost 50 years later, starting to make progress and get to the point where we can really start protecting the unborn in a real way. But they've been controlled opposition, and they've basically just been giving away the culture slower than Democrats would. And frankly, Father, that has done so much damage to the Republican brand. My grandparents, they were JFK Democrats, and it's funny, they were Catholic Democrats, and they were very forceful. They clarified we were not FDR Democrats. We did not like him. We liked JFK, but we don't like him. But they came over to the Republican Party because of Ronald Reagan, and they said that it was the first time in their lives where they didn't have to choose between their pocketbook and their values. And there's something to be said about that. And the Republican Party has destroyed that opportunity because when it comes to, divided Catholics who really struggle with the economic agenda of the Republican Party that's primarily centered on helping businesses and business owners, they would love to vote for the Republicans to help on these cultural issues, to protect our kids, to protect the unborn, to protect families, but they don't take us seriously. Mm-hmm. They think that we're lying to them. They realize, wait, how long have you been trying to overturn Roe v. Wade? 50 years? You couldn't get anything done in 50 years, really? You're not doing anything on marriage. They look at the Republicans and how they punt on everything, and it's hurt us. And if we want to really build a winning coalition going forward, we need the DeSantis model, where you take the culture seriously, where you look at culture as a way to work in politics and change the country for the better. And governors like DeSantis are leading the way. They're saying, no, we're not just going to slow it down. We need to turn this thing around because we have transgender toddlers right now, transgender 3-year-olds, what is America going to look like in 5 to 10 years? I have some predictions, and it's not pretty.
Right. I saw the other day, I don't recall whether I mentioned it in the first half of the show, but there is a company that can, I'm trying to think of a family-friendly way of saying it. They've knitted appendages that you can put on your infant if you suspect that your infant may be transgender. That's facilitating a kind of madness. This is bringing alcohol to alcoholics. This is not what a healthy, happy culture does. This is not what a flourishing culture does. And we're not motivated by hate. It's actually, we love what God has made. We love the true dignity of human beings, and we love God's wisdom inscribed in human bodies and human souls, and we need to act accordingly. Friends, when we come back, we're going to continue our conversation with Terry Schilling of the American Principles Project. We've been talking about social and political issues that are affecting us and how we can begin to push back. In the next segment, we're going to talk about learning how to be happy cultural warriors. Be part of the conversation and follow what we're following by following us on Gab. That's gab.com. Our channel is The Catholic Current. Everything you need to bring this conversation to your family and friends, we give to you. Take it to your family and friends, and together we can take it around the world. We'll be back in just 2 minutes. Please do stay with us.
There's no better way to start your day than with spiritual formation from inspiring priests.
Patriotism is a virtue that was allied to the old virtue of the Greeks and Latin called pietas. Pietas meant love of God, love of neighbor, love of country. And when one goes out, all go out.
That's Sermons for Everyday Living, weekdays from 6 to 7 a.m. Eastern on the Station of the Cross.
After today's broadcast, go to the Catholic Current show page on thestationofthecross.com for info on today's guests, the show resource links, and to sign up for our weekly email of upcoming shows.
Praise be Jesus Christ. This is Father Robert McTague of the Society of Jesus, your daily host for the Catholic Current, where we bring Christ to the world and the world to Christ. You're listening to us from the Station of the Cross Studios, your local radio station, and the iCatholic Radio mobile app, where we proclaim the fullness of truth with clarity and charity. I'm speaking today with Terry Schilling. He is president of the American Principles Project. We've been talking about transgenderism, federal regulations, cultural Marxism, and intelligent responses, interesting responses from Governor DeSantis of Florida. Terry, before I get into the issue of being a happy warrior, we have to map out the battle space. A significant dimension of the battle space is big tech and social media. People who probably won't like the conversation you and I have been having today. Governor DeSantis has some things to say about social media too, doesn't he?
Absolutely. Governor DeSantis, I got to talk with him for a little bit at the bill signing. It was fun. I got to present him with a girl dad hat for my organization for protecting girls' sports, and he loved it. But it was funny. We talked, and I said, what's going on? Like, why are you doing what you're doing? And he said, I want to keep Florida free. With the COVID response and everything, like all these states, they're giving everything away. They're shutting down their schools and everything. I want to keep Florida free. That's what motivates me. And is he keeping Florida free or what? The thing is about the Republican Party, and this is what makes DeSantis stand out. It's been embedded in us, almost like we've been brainwashed to think that anytime you use government for anything, it's bad. It's socialism. It's communism. That's not true. Right? Government does a lot of good things that we like. Fire departments, police departments, national defense, breaking up monopolies is part of that. And right now, these big tech companies have become so big that they control speech. And what I mean by that is when they decide to start censoring a topic or censoring language and the way we talk about it, it impacts other areas of culture. It says to the rest of the world, the rest of the country, this is unacceptable. They're basically changing the cultural laws. And yeah, you don't have to use Facebook. And yeah, you can leave Twitter. Well, where are you going to go? Because that's where everyone is. And frankly, they don't have a right to set these new rules. They're public. They're open to the public, and there are certain rules that go along with being open to the public. I get what they're trying to do. You know, I like to give people the benefit of the doubt, and I do think that these big tech people are well intentioned. I think that they think that people like you and I are filled with hate, and it's primarily because they don't ever listen to us. They don't ever have a conversation with us. They don't sit down and say, what motivates you? Because I had this conversation yesterday with a reporter. She said, Terry, was it a hateful event with DeSantis at this women's sports signing? Because that's what the mainstream media always says. I said, no, everyone was so happy. And by the way, I'm motivated by love. I love people that suffer from gender dysphoria. I love people that suffer from same-sex attraction. I want to do the right thing with them. I want to make them happy. Like I told the woman that I interviewed with yesterday, I said, on this transgender issue, the left's proposal and their solution to this is to mutilate these kids, permanently sterilize them, get them on a pathway of permanent medication to where they have to pay money the rest of their lives just to feel normal. I want a different proposal. I want to match their brains to their bodies. They want to match their bodies to their brain and alter it. I want to match their brains to their bodies. And if we're being honest, that's the only way to solve all of these mental problems, right? Like, and I'm sorry, but if you say it's a mental illness, if you say it's a mental problem, they act as if you're dehumanizing these people. You know, last I checked, people with drug addictions, people with alcoholism, people with problems mentally, they're human beings, and they have inherent and infinite worth. They have human dignity. But part of their dignity is giving them the proper care that they need and deserve. And what these kids with gender dysphoria need and deserve is a doctor who will give them the help that they need. And that is matching their brains to their body, making them comfortable in their own bodies. You know, if a woman came up to me and said, I'm really unhappy, I need a boob job, I would tell her that that's not going to make her happy. I have a friend who, you know, he gets tattoos all the time. He thinks it's going to make him happy. Well, guess what? His whole body's filled with tattoos, and he's still not happy. You don't alter your body. External things are not going to make you happy. They're not going to make you content. The only way you're going to be content is by loving God, loving your family, and accepting who you are and who God made you to be, and being that person that God made you to be. That's the only way for happiness.
And part of real compassion, part of real love is raising children to have confidence in what they perceive. And, you know, as a professor of philosophy, what alarms me is we're setting up a culture, wittingly or unwittingly, people are cooperating with this, that if you say to Sally or Billy, are you a boy or a girl, ordinarily they would just look down and they would have confidence in what they saw. But to say, no, you can't trust your lying eyes. You can't trust what human experience has always taught. You certainly can't trust what the church has always taught. But if you come to this website, if you come to this YouTube video, and if you come to this government program, we're going to tell you how to teach the experts. And you know, and the cult of the expert has taken a hit in recent days, weeks, and months, which I think is a reason for hope as well. So, you know, I know there are a lot of people who say, "Hey guys, you know, I got things to do today. I can't fly or drive to Washington. If I call the senator, he's not going to pick up the phone. I got to pick up the kids at soccer practice. I got to make dinner this evening." What are really simple, practical things that ordinary people can do to contribute to a good outcome?
The most basic thing to do, forget Congress, right? Forget the presidency. Focus on the local level. Find out when your school board elections are. Find out who's on your school board. Find out who the good guys are. Who are the bad guys? Who is hurting us? Who's supporting the bad policies? And vote on these local school board elections. I talk to people, I talk to families all the time, because what we do is we organize and we engage families in politics. We help them get over the daunting nature and the daunting appearance that politics gives off. And I tell them, these school board races, a lot of times you can get elected with like 150 votes, 250 votes. And it's because turnout on these election days is so low. They don't hold them in November typically. They typically hold them in March or April or May. And it's on a random day when no one realizes that it's happening. We have to stop letting the left take advantage of that. Right. And, maybe it would make sense to pass laws in states that force school board elections and local elections to be held on the same day that federal elections are. And you'll start to see things turn around big time, and you'll get a lot more checks and balances. But right now, these left-wingers that are on our school boards, that are on our city councils, that are serving as mayors, they aren't afraid of us because they know that all they have to do to win their election is turn out 1,200 votes, 200 votes, and they're going to get reelected because they know that we're busy with our families. So we've got to figure out when these elections are. We have to make sure we vote in every single election after doing our homework. That's the most basic, easiest thing to do. It's not hard.
And we also have to monitor closely things like elections for county sheriff and for district attorney as well. These are all very important things. Terry Schilling, president of the American Principles Project, thank you for your time today. I hope we can have another conversation soon.
I would love that, Father. Thank you so much for having me on.
I'm Jesuit Father Robert McTague, your host here every day at the Catholic Current. Join us tomorrow. We're going to welcome back author and journalist Phil Lawler of Catholic Culture. We're going to be talking about contagious faith during and after COVID. After the broadcast today, go to thestationofthecross.com, get our resources list, download our audio as podcasts. Let's keep the conversation going. Through the intercession of Our Lady of Mount Carmel, may Almighty God surround you with a legion of angels with flaming swords to light your path, to protect you from all harm and every evil until you reach the happiness of heaven. And may the blessing of Almighty God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit descend upon you and remain with you forever. Go in peace, and please pray for me.
Thank you for listening to this podcast brought to you by thestationofthecross.com, a listener-funded nonprofit organization. If this podcast has helped you in your spiritual journey, please prayerfully consider donating at thestationofthecross.com by calling 1-877-888-6279 or through our free iCatholic Radio mobile app.